The scene opened by showing 5 martial arts masters. They were seen discussing martial arts schools, which are no longer relevant in this day, and this made it difficult for them to find successors who could become a Maruchi, aka the highest masters of Tao. For your information, Tao martial arts has similarities with the concept of Taichi, because they both come from Taoism. However, this martial art technique relies more on breathing, while Taichi has soft movements like a dance. On the other hand, there was a minimarket cashier named Yujin, who was watching a thug. She suspected that this man would pickpocket a lady's bag. Apparently, Yujin can predict someone's future just by touching someone's hand, and she got this gift from her adoptive father, who is a master of Tao. At the same time, there was a geeky policeman named Sangwon, who was ticketing a car that ran a red light. It turned out that the car belonged to an official. But as an honest policeman, Sangwon still gave him a ticket, so he argued with the driver. In the middle of their argument, Sangwon saw a thief driving a motorcycle who stole a purse of a pedestrian. Apparently, he was the person Yujin had just seen. So, without thinking twice, Sangwon immediately chased the thief. At the same time, Yujin also chased the thief by jumping over skyscrapers, until finally she succeeded in knocking him down with her action. But when Yujin was about to attack the thief with her inner power, it instead hit Sangwon. Because of that, Sangwon fainted, and after beating up the thief, Yujin brought this geeky policeman to the Masters of Tao. There, the 5 masters saw great potential in Sangwon. According to their insight, he had enormous Chi energy. Thanks to the acupuncture treatment, Sangwon finally woke up from his stupor, and the masters told him about the extraordinary Chi energy within him. In other words, he had the potential to become a great Maruchi. Unfortunately, Sangwon did not believe it because in this modern world, it was impossible for such a thing to exist. Hearing his doubts, the masters then released their move and inner power. However, Sangwon still didn't believe that he had enormous Chi energy. But at the same time, Sangwon didn't realize that he was releasing this power. On the way home, Sangwon tried to use his power again. Unfortunately, he didn't know how to deal with it, so instead of looking cool, he looked like a crazy person. Meanwhile, the masters are still discussing Sangwon, who has a natural talent that should be kept. In the next morning, Sangwon was scolded by his superior for not being able to catch the thief and instead ticketing an important official. But Sangwon didn't really care about his boss' words. After that, Sangwon and his partner were assigned to carry out patrols around the city, and one of the places they had to check was the gangsters' base camp. When they got there, Sangwon's colleague greeted the gangster boss, who apparently had been friends with the police for a long time, so it was not surprising that his gang was always safe, even though this thug had a lot of illegal business. Sangwon was too naive and honest, so he didn't want to just leave the gangsters without checking. Of course, this made the gangster boss furious, until finally he went crazy and beat Sangwon up badly. The gangster boss even forced Sangwon to lick his dirty shoes. In this situation, Sangwon could only surrender. After returning from the gangster's headquarters, Sangwon was lectured by his friend to be a flexible person and not be too honest. Because after all, good people will lose to people who have the power. Feeling stressed, Sangwon got very drunk in the toilet and was babbling to himself like a crazy person. Because of his loud voice, his boss was annoyed, feeling disturbed. The next day, Sangwon went to the Taoist hermitage and he intended to learn martial arts so that he wouldn't be looked down upon by other people. Not long afterward, Yujin allowed him to go inside. Then Sangwon met Yujin's adoptive father, Jawun. This master of Tao then explained about an altar called Yongsan. This altar was the center of Chi energy and the power of the mountain, which is intertwined and united. Even though the altar was old, the great Chi energy was still stored in it. Luckily, the military headquarters managed to find the remains of the altar building, which had been buried for hundreds of years. Sangwon, who heard Jawun's story, didn't seem to understand because his explanation was too sloppy. Meanwhile, Yujin didn't agree if Sangwon became a student at the hermitage. She felt that this geeky policeman won't be able to become a Maruchi because he was considered too stupid. However, Jawun still allowed Sangwon to practice. But before practicing the Tao moves, Yujin explained some basic things. She said that in this world, there are many people who have basic Tao techniques, but they never realize it. Some examples are the laborer, even the peddler. If it was seen with the naked eye, there's nothing special. But actually, they had extraordinary strength and balance. That evening, the masters carried out training on top of the building to maintain their energy. The scene then showed the excavation team assigned to find the Yongsan altar. But not long afterward, they heard a strange voice from inside the building. Then, after breaking it in, they were immediately shocked because there was a mysterious old man who was meditating inside. Shortly, the next day, Sangwon officially became a student in Tao Hermitage. But during the first training, he actually complained because his hands were tied while he was eating. Apart from that, he was only allowed to eat vegetables. Then he was told to train for his hand's strength by hitting the hot sand on the cauldron, and this made him very annoyed because the training given by the masters made no sense to him. He then complained to his teacher that he wanted to practice wrestling as soon as possible. Hearing that, the master immediately scolded Sangwon because of his inappropriate behavior. Even though to be a Maruchi, he must be able to control his emotions. On the other hand, the excavation team returned to investigate the altar building, and not long after, a team member reported that the mysterious old man had escaped from detention. It turned out that this old man had gone to a grocery store, and there, he immediately attacked a shopkeeper with very strong Tao moves, and he was able to absorb other people's energy. After using his great power, he managed to absorb the shopkeeper's energy. Thanks to his power, he turned young again, while the shopkeeper turned into an old man, hundreds of years old. The next day, Sangwon returned to training with one of the masters. This time, he was trained to do confrontation techniques using eye gaze, but unfortunately, he got this in return. As a result, Sangwon had to wear an eye patch like a pirate. After training, he was actually scolded by his mother because he was injured and had a huge portion for dinner. Because Sangwon looked starving, his mother told him to sell something to earn more income. A few days later, two Taoist masters appeared in a reality show on television. Here, they intended to introduce Tao martial arts to young people who didn't believe it. But when they wanted to split the tree trunk with their hands, their strength suddenly disappeared. Even though they have tried many times, they both still failed. In another place, the mysterious old man who was turned into a young man was monitoring the situation from the top of the building. Apparently, he was also a Taoist master named Huban, who was buried hundreds of years ago. Now he was looking for the whereabouts of the remaining Taoist masters to take something from them. So it was clear that he had bad intentions. Meanwhile, Jawun was hanging around in his room, and he felt that there was a big threat coming to his family. On the other hand, Sangwon and Yujin were preparing for the training. When Yujin had left the dressing room, Sangwon secretly searched her bag, and here, Sangwon found information about Yujin's birthday. After they were ready, they immediately underwent the martial arts training. This time, they would train punching techniques and body resilience. Apart from that, Sangwon also underwent training to control himself and his mind, and he had to learn to fight himself. From here, he became more serious in practicing and applying Taoist moves in everyday life. After successfully mastering Taoist martial arts techniques, Sangwon was given advice by the masters. They advised that Sangwon must not use Taoist martial arts to cheat, so if he is attacking or defending, he has to hold this principle. That night, while on duty, Sangwon ran into Hugan, who was crossing the road before the pedestrian traffic light turned green. Sangwon tried to stop him and wanted to take him to the police station for violating traffic. But because Hugan's spiritual energy was so strong, he was able to escape by jumping over a building like a parkour athlete. Sangwon didn't stay still and tried to do the same. Not long after, two Taoist masters met Hugan by accident, and it turned out they recognized this man. Here, Hugan asked for a key from the two of them, but because they didn't want to hand it over, Hugan immediately went berserk. As a result, the two masters were seriously injured and immediately taken to the hospital. Jawun was shocked because his two friends couldn't move like statues. On the other hand, Yujin cupped Sangwon. She then forbade him from using martial arts carelessly. And in the middle of their conversation, Sang-won gave Yujin a birthday present, and suddenly, Yujin became embarrassed. At night, Sang-won practiced swords alone, and Yujin secretly watched him. Here, Yujin started to realize that this geeky policeman really had great potential to become a maruchi. After seeing him practicing, she invited Sang-won to dinner at a grilled chicken restaurant. Apart from that, she also gave him a bracelet. Yujin said that this bracelet could help Sang-won control himself. Not long after that, the fire on their table extinguished, so Yujin revived it with the hand-blowing technique. Seeing this, Sang-won wanted to learn this technique, but Yujin told him to calm down first, because over time he would definitely get the hang of it. Not long after, they were approached by the gangsters who had beaten Sang-won up. But this time, Sang-won intended to teach them a lesson. However, Yujin warned Sang-won not to fight, but Sang-won ignored her and immediately attacked them brutally. This time, Sang-won succeeded in beating up the gangsters, including their boss who once looked down on him. But Yujin instead hit Sang-won in the face because she was disappointed with his actions. Elsewhere, Hyugun seemed to have defeated one of the masters by locking all his movements. So now, there were only 2 Taoist masters left. Not long after that, Jawoon and one of Taoist masters suspected that the person who injured their 3 friends was Hyugun. It turned out that Hyugun was a former warrior who had betrayed them. So, actually, Jawoon and the other masters of Tao had been alive for hundreds of years. Meanwhile, the purpose of Hyugun's resurrection was to get the key that was brought by Jawoon. But they realized that Hyugun's power was too strong because he was filled with revenge. What's more, he had been locked up in an altar for centuries, therefore Jawoon had to immediately make Sang-won a maruchi. On the other hand, Sang-won seemed to be apologizing to Yujin because of his careless actions. Unfortunately, this woman was already disappointed. After that, Sang-won and Yujin went back to Hermitage to take a rest, but when they arrived there, they were surprised by Hyugun's arrival. At first, Sang-won didn't realize that Hyugun's arrival was a threat, and unfortunately, Hyugun suddenly attacked them. With his great fighting skills, Hyugun was able to beat them easily. Then, seeing that Yujin was being attacked, Sang-won was emotional, and it awakened his spiritual energy. Finally, Sang-won's attack was successful, but unfortunately, the fight had to stop when Jawoon and one of the masters came to that place. So, without saying much, Hyugun asked for the key that he had been looking for. But because Jawoon didn't want to hand it to him, he finally used violence again and again. Feeling cornered, Hyugun immediately ran away. Then, to stop Hyugun's brutality, one of the masters decided to chase him. Not long after, the master caught up with Hyugun, and here, he asked for the key again. Finally, it was revealed that the key in question was the one that opened the door to the highest power. It was said that the person who was able to master it could definitely rule the world. Of course, the masters of Tao would not hand over the key to someone like Hyugun. Finally, a fight broke out again. When both of them fell, Sang-won came to help his teacher, but unfortunately, Hyugun managed to stab the master. On the other hand, Yujin was being treated by her father. She then said that Sang-won managed to injure Hyugun with the sound vibration technique, even though he had never been trained in this technique before. After that, Sang-won appeared, carrying the master who was already lifeless. On the other hand, Hyugun, who was seriously injured, used his strength to find out the location of the Yongsan altar. It didn't take long until he finally managed to find it. The next day, Jawoon told about ancient times, where there was an evil general who wanted to steal the key to unlocking power. He even had the heart to slaughter the citizens to get his wish. Then Hyugun, who was once a maruchi, was determined to finish the general, but unfortunately, he lost control and carried out the massacre. Since then, Hyugun turned into an Arahan or a maruchi who had reached the highest level of power. But the masters of Tao who knew about it immediately hid the key in their bodies. Apart from that, they also locked up Hyugun so he wouldn't turn into an evil person. Because the only master left was Jawoon, he transferred the key into Yujin and Sang-won's body. After that, he told them both to go as far as possible so Hyugun wouldn't catch them. But on the way, Yujin changed her mind and decided to help her father. At the same time, Hyugun came to get the key at the Hermitage. At first, he asked nicely, but the key in question had been moved, so they almost had a fist fight again. At the same time, Sang-won caught up with Yujin, who was running towards the hermitage. The two of them then jumped over the buildings to quickly get to their destination. When they got there, Jawoon wasn't there anymore. Apart from that, the condition in the hermitage was also a mess, which meant that Jawoon had been defeated by Hyugun. But Sang-won accidentally saw his teacher's whereabouts when he touched the Yongsan altar painting. So, without thinking twice, they immediately went to the altar in the middle of the military headquarters. And when they arrived at that place, Yujin asked Sang-won to look for Jawoon, while she would fight Hyugun. Soon after that, Sang-won heard Jawoon's voice, thanks to the Chai energy in his body. Finally, he managed to find his teacher, who apparently was having a power struggle with Hyugun using telepathy. Meanwhile, Yujin was having a battle with Hyugun. When Yujin was cornered, Sang-won came and gave Hyugun a surprise attack. Then he showed a tattoo on his back, which was a sign that he had the key. Of course, Hyugun didn't accept this, so he was furious and immediately attacked them blindly. With their brutality, Sang-won and Yujin worked together to defeat Hyugun. The three of them clashed using each other's swords fiercely. In the end, Yujin succeeded in stabbing Hyugun's stomach, but unfortunately, he became even more fierce. Sang-won did not remain silent and immediately used all his strength. Unfortunately, Hyugun was actually able to seize the key from Sang-won's body. When Sang-won almost gave up, he received guidance from Jawoon, who whispered to him telepathically. Then, Sang-won got up again and fought with all his might. Finally, the long fight was over and Hyugun was forced to admit Sang-won's greatness. After that, Hyugun disappeared from the altar. At the end of the film, Sang-won and Yujin unite to protect the city from evil. Like superheroes, they fight gangsters who are always causing trouble, and this time, Sang-won is no longer someone who can be underestimated because he has become Er-Han, the master of Tao with great power. The end.